Hey Brian, I'd be super interested in a future video about what you think regarding payment profit models in video games.
These titles are going from being industry leaders and iconic games to being a literal joke. That's not like a pejorative. They are becoming a joke in the industry.
Yeah.
And that's because they're playing by such an outdated playbook. I just think it's folding in, and you have to have a better strategy.
I have a strategy for them. How about you make a game and you sell a game, right? You make the game. I know it's a hard concept. You actually finish the game, right? And you get all the bugs and stuff out of it, or 90% of them out of there. And then, I know it's crazy, then you release it.
So whenever the internet has a conversation about monetization in video games specifically, it always seems to go wrong. And there's a lot of reasons for this. A lot of people have deeply rooted beliefs about monetization and video games, kind of the intersection of art and commerce, to a more personal degree. Because when you think about video games, when I think about video games, there's a real personal experience. There's a real connection. There's a real history that I have with them as just a form of entertainment and a form of art and a form of commerce that I have seen a lot of different parts over the course of my life as a kid, a young adult, and into adulthood, studying video game design and programming with the intent of actually entering it into a career, but then also looking at the hard realities of what it means to be a game programmer. And so that's part of what this video is going to talk about. And I'm going to try to, I guess, address a lot of key lies that I see gamers tell themselves. And not that you're wrong for believing anything. And this isn't an attack on anybody's personal view about the industry and monetization. But this is just as real of a conversation as I can kind of put out together for you guys to kind of talk about my core philosophy, what I've seen, what I've when I've talked to different developers, when I've actually hired different developers out of the game industry and in more into the kind of I guess business level application development, and what horror stories they've shared with me and what realities that exist that generally aren't brought to the surface. And a lot of it ends up being is that as long as you have a great game, as long as you release a good game, a beloved game, pretty much anything else that kind of happened to get that game out to the people doesn't really matter. It's only when a game that people love or are excited about really falls flat on its face that you see the kind of articles going in talking about leadership and, oh, the monetization was poor. Generally speaking, and this isn't, on an individual level, somebody could easily take umbrage with, whatever the monetization they're using. But on the more general level, good game equals it doesn't matter. Just leave me alone. I want to have fun with my game. And there's a lot of reasons for this. So this video is titled, "You will own nothing and be happy." And it's because, of course, over the last couple of months, that's a phrase I keep hearing over and over again. So there are going to be some real life parallels to, I think, what's going on. You're probably going to hear some anger in my answers and in my voice. These are just concerns and frustrations that I have as a millennial, as somebody who kind of follows video games for a long time. But it won't be very politically charged. I'm going to try to keep that very neutral in terms of my answers. But let's go ahead and dive in to the topic at hand, because I'm going to start with kind of the lies that we tell ourselves, the lies that I see, kind of people iterate online, and why I think essentially it ends up becoming this, this behemoth in which that it feels almost impossible to tackle. I think it is achievable. And I think essentially when I've called on the past that, we kind of need a consumer advocacy group, because everybody kind of points to things that are safety, things that are in place. So for example, HR is here to defend me. HR's got my back. HR is a tool of corporations to get you to be more efficient and to protect the company, right? So that's an example of what we've seen happen and going on. And I kind of see that within the ESRB is here to protect gamers. No, the ESRB was founded to protect the companies, as a way to kind of stave off government regulation back in the 90s. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive in and explore. I got my notes here, so you might see me kind of look over to them so I can kind of hit some of the key points, make sure this video is, concise and, as tight as possible without wasting anybody's time. All right. So I think the first lie we tell ourselves, I see this happen and stated multiple times, the companies actually make enough profit. They make enough money. And there was no such thing as enough money or profit in a company. A company's sole purpose of being, and we'll explore some more company stuff here in a second, is to make money. That's why they were founded. That is their ultimate goal. And yes, they're made of individuals that can actually have like morals and values and want to obviously make good games. But generally speaking, the company exists to make money. So whenever I hear that the company makes enough money, I go, well, no, there isn't that. Like for an individual, for you and me, like I can make enough money to survive. I can make enough money to feed my family. There is a level of like, oh, yeah, I'm good. Now I want to maybe be more philanthropic. Man, talk about falling on my face with that one. Philanthropic. There we go. And then you'll see companies do that, but companies enter into that phase when it actually, I think, benefits them on a profit line. And you see this happen with a lot of people who hit it big financially multiple times, that you'll see like, oh, so-and-so had a windfall and it's very public. Ninja's a great example. And then you see them immediately kind of talk about their charity that they're starting. And my wife worked a lot within, charities and things like that, like kidneys, the Kidney Foundation, for example. And one of the things they always kind of see is that you always kind of see these charities spring up that basically do the same thing, and then they eventually kind of go away. Ultimately, if you really want to be, charitable, sometimes it helps to actually find kind of established organizations with really good, structures, so that you can actually kind of tap into a bigger market that actually has a real impact. You always kind of want to look at what that donation to charity, like is the company given, making sure that 98% of what it brings in is going to charity rather than administration fees and stuff. You always kind of have to look at that, but you'll see people who end up making a lot of money start talking about, oh, I've created a charity, blah, blah, blah. And generally that helps kind of ease and helps the public kind of be like, well, yeah, they're making a lot of money, but it's okay. They're charitable. And as human beings, I think it is in our nature to want to be charitable. And so that's just something that I think speaks to everybody. But when it comes down to the companies give money so they can make money. It's a good public image. It's a public perception. It makes you feel good about the brand. It makes you feel good about the cause you're supporting. But when you really kind of start following it through, we've seen times where companies are charitable and they end up monopolizing an entire market. They end up kind of shooting an entire, like I've seen somebody give away shoes, and then you go look at the real impact of it, and it basically, they drove out all shoe manufacturers in that area. And so it ends up like kind of devastating an industry by being charitable. So there's a real complex relationship with the economics on a global scale that I think is far outside the qualifications of this video to kind of dive into. Now, the second thing is that a company cares what I believe in. I see this happen a lot. I want to support them because they believe in the causes I believe in. And maybe people within the company do. I think when you look at companies, especially large companies, they got hundreds of thousands of people. So definitely there's going to be people who maybe align with the things that you care about. But again, a company will, support things to either save them money or to make them money. And you see this kind of meme and this frustration happen with anything over the course of a year, like any kind of time that there's like, oh, this is the cause that we all care about for this month. And then we just, amazingly forget about it the following month. It is in and of itself, like it makes people feel good. And I wonder if there's going to be a threshold in which that eventually just kind of like wears itself thin. It's like, why are we just doing this for a month? Like, why don't we just be awesome to each other like all year round? And I can't speak to like every cause. So maybe like you enjoy like a month that might be dedicated to you, or, but I just go like, well, why not make it, a year? let's just really commit, let's just pull off the Band-Aid and let's just say this is the year of X or Y. But that's just kind of my perspective. So I kind of see those companies do that, but I see they do that because it benefits them again financially. It's all about kind of what's the bottom line. It either brings in money, it's brand awareness and marketing, and then at the end of the day, it could save them money rather than having somebody be like, you didn't, why didn't you jump on, this thing that was happening, whatever month, etc. And then I also see the devs are passionate about the game here, but they're not passionate about there. I want devs that are passionate about games And my experience in working with the different developers within the industry is that all developers are actually very passionate about the games they're making. But what you end up finding, and I usually kind of put my frustration usually on the publishers, etc., is that I feel like they are engineered to take advantage of that passion, and so that they end up paying. You get less money if you go work in games for the most part. Like there are obviously like incentives if you have a big hit game, and depending on the contract, the publisher gets paid first, then the money goes to the devs based off the contract, and if there's extra residuals, like you might get some additional money as a developer on that game. And usually you kind of hope on those because you want to make a good game. No developer is working for years on that to make a bad game. What I do see happening is that we obviously see the concept that 10 years is like the more time you have to work on a game, the better it is. But that doesn't actually factor in the realities of kind of the human resources that are applied on that. It means if it took 10 years to make a game, you had a ton of turnover, you had a ton of changing directions, and you might have lost the vision, you might have lost the thread of fun. And so ultimately, more time doesn't equal better game. And so essentially, you kind of take all of these into a part. And I feel like there is that sense that because we have such a deep connection to video games, we do tend to excuse certain models because that either the game is good or we end up being frustrated at something because it doesn't live up to our expectations. But at the end of the day, like these companies are making games. It's, again, art and commerce, like button heads pretty hard to make profit, and they're going to figure out ways to do that. And so there's a lot of things that have actually happened in the industry over the course of, let's just say, the last 20 years, but we can probably even narrow it down to the last 10 that have had a dramatic impact on our games and what we're doing. And so those are the shift to digital, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The impact of free-to-play microtransactions, generational training. I think this is something that a lot of people haven't picked up on, but maybe that's just because I'm a parent. Subscription fatigue, the lack of rest actually in our lives, and then essentially the economic realities of what's going on within game development specifically. So we haven't seen prices of games go up with the exception of the PS5 this generation, and they did that for the PS5 so they could hit a price point on the console to make it competitive with the Xbox. And that's why you kind of saw them kind of playing this like, will they, won't they actually announce the price of the system because all of these have economic impact. So let's actually focus in on that topic itself. Game developers, the publishers, the platforms, they obviously get money from game sales, and that varies from 30% to 15%. You've seen kind of Steam and Epic. Everybody's kind of trying to find that model in which that the publisher gets a certain, like the platform gets a certain cut of the sales for having their game in their store, much like a physical retail, but obviously we have the shift to digital. And with that aspect, that's where we start to see people getting competitive. So PlayStation was able to lower overall the cost of the console, increasing the price per game. So ultimately, every game that it sells, it's able to get a little bit more of that money back to kind of offset that cost to deliver a competitive price. But we haven't also seen a massive shift in the price of consoles over the course of that. Now, if you go look at charts going all the way back from the 80s to now, like consoles and everything cost way more for the value of the dollar than they do today. And so you actually kind of have a decline in that. And again, remembering that companies exist to make money, and they're also, yes, they're making more money than they ever have, but there is no ceiling on that. If they can make even more money, they're going to kind of try to find the way. So you see that happen, you see kind of prices adjust, but you also see a couple things. Like when I talk about the lack of rest in our lives, this is something that is brought on by social media. I would highly encourage you to get all of it off your phone. You'll find that you get hours of your day back. You're going to have so much better rest. You're going to get better sleep. You can still go use social media, but I would recommend scheduling it as a part of, like, almost kind of in a way of your work, etc. Don't engage with it all the time. It doesn't necessarily leave you feeling good. In fact, there's a drug aspect to it. In fact, when you look at the studies of the brain on social media, it truly keeps you addicted, and it's built and it's engineered to do so. So be sure to take a break. Feel free, to get it off your phone. I think it ultimately will be a benefit in your life. That's what I advise content creators to do. It's what I actually advise everybody to do. And do it for a couple weeks. The first couple days are going to be painful, but it does actually contribute to the lack of rest in our lives. That constant feeling that you're behind, that constant feeling that you got to go get those side hustles and be on the grind and do all these things. I've reached out to several of you actually reached out to me talking about, like, Brian, how do you do it? Like, you feel frustrated because it's like you see me doing something, but what you don't see is all the years, all the, getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning building and working and studying and, all of that. And it ends up being a huge ask. And nowadays it actually is a little bit easier, but it's still I'm still trying to work and build my own business and do these things. And it can feel very restful. And so it's important for me to make sure that I take time away from things. And so that's kind of a thing. So you have that, but apply that to everybody's psychological mindset going on, is that if you constantly have that, gaming ends up being this, hopefully this reprieve, but in a way it's actually kind of seen with the rise of content creation, etc., even within like streaming, is that almost what I call, kind of a pay to earn or play to earn, which isn't directly connected to the pay to earn kind of thing that we heard from Square Enix this year, but ultimately where it's like, oh, I play video games and I'm able to make money off of that, and then constantly then feeling like you're behind, right? So that's hopefully connected. Hopefully I made that point very clear. We see subscription fatigue. This is natural in terms of the fact that it feels like everything wants a subscription, and this kind of ties into the financial issues with right now within millennials being completely in debt, being kind of sold this bill of goods for college and university. We're probably the most highly educated generation in history, and the most underwater in terms of being able to actually buy and build wealth. There are exceptions to all of these rules, so please just note that there are exceptions to all these rules, but you end up having this group of people who are just kind of constantly running, constantly subscribed, like feel like they can't afford things. And that leads into not being able to purchase video games with the shift to digital being kind of a key aspect where you would buy less. And so companies are looking at that. And so that's where you see the rise of things like Game Pass. That's why you see the rise of more free-to-play microtransactions. And that's actually a really, key point to the whole why things are changing. Now, when we get into free-to-play and generational training, when you start to look at, and this is like what I prevent my children from playing these kind of games. So if a game is free to play, especially with the cash shop, my kids aren't allowed to touch it. But I'm the exception to the rule. I sit down and talk with parents all the time. I give talks. I try to create videos and educational materials for parents, because the issue is, especially like if you don't have kids, like this might not resonate, but for someone who has kids, is that they're the ones who are playing games. They're the ones who are being trained in these models. You see it heavily with things like Netflix and Disney, all about building in and baking in that nostalgia, so you don't become a customer once, you become a customer for life. And all of that is engineered, in which that we've been engineered, we've been trained. You see that kind of nostalgia that drives your drive into a video game, which might get you to purchase, might get you to rent, might get you to buy that, that skin within the game itself. And it's all based off of years and years of, social and media engineering that's impacted us. And not that that's all bad. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a trip down nostalgia's lane, but companies see that. And that's why you actually see, and for my case, I see Netflix investing heavily in children's programming, because they want to build out that excitement for whatever that brand is. And then they are the owner and the proprietor of that brand, and ideally building out sustainability over the course of generations, and all driving back to profits. But generational training in terms of microtransactions and free to play, we already see that within generations. And so what you end up seeing is that you see this shift into that model, full stop, where we're in our 30s and our 40s, and some of you probably maybe in your 20s. Generally speaking, like overall, like the range for this channel is 20 to 60 to 70. Hello, all the ye. And what ends up happening with all that is that you literally see that, on one end of the generational spectrum, why I don't want to rent my games, I want to own my games. And then on the other half of the generational perspective is like, I'm just having fun. So what if it's just a couple of bucks? And that's just because you have that generational training. And the thing is that the older generation is being replaced by the new generation. And in, one more cycle of it, I don't think it's going to have any, I don't think the concept of any kind of ownership will exist out there unless we all get together and do something about it. But here's the thing. It just doesn't happen. Like every time, like gamers are so diverse, and it's such a massive industry. And when we're talking about billions and billions of gamers, ultimately, I think essentially, and this is kind of the sucky part about all of it, is like, well, you got to support the things that you like. And at the same time, if you don't like a certain model, you gotta not support that. And it's like, $20 walking away from $1 trillion. Like you're, at the end of the day, the trillion doesn't even notice that the $20 walked out of the room. So again, I think just understand the realities of what games are. They're here to be an entertainment and a form of escape. And that's essentially where, when you start to look at the people who are really frustrated by it, they represent a kind of a small, passionate group where the majority of people are like, I'm just here to play a game. I'm just here to do, have fun and kind of jump out. I just am needing escape from the realities of the world. Don't sit here and shoot myself in the foot. Don't ruin my fun. And I know I get people frustrated with that because they feel like it's, if only that 80 or 90% of the population would get on board and being frustrated. And what you'll find is that over time, some of that base will move into the frustrated phase of it. But they're being replaced by a younger generation who hasn't yet been burned and frustrated. And I see this hands down all the time. Sitting down playing with my kids, Game Pass, I brought it up a few times. It's a great value to me. But yeah, we're playing games that are on Game Pass, and then they got games for the kids like Paw Patrol. I wouldn't buy Paw Patrol, but my kids and I get to sit down and play Paw Patrol, and we have a really good time with it. And that's that generational training, and that's essentially kind of the model. So overall, long story short, I see that what PlayStation and Xbox are doing as kind of a value-driven proposition of here's a bunch of games that you get to have access to. It gives developers the ability to kind of get their game out in front of more people and reduce the overall risk that it takes to make a game, because game developers aren't just these big monolithic publishers. They're also smaller people that are driven by their passion. And sometimes when you think about it, when you talk about no rest and being constantly on the grind and subscription fatigue, and when you bring all of these points that I've brought up in this video together, you end up realizing that the people who are, I think, getting hurt the most are the most passionate and the ones that are willing to take the most risk. And so they have to find creative ways of kind of making sure that they're sustainable, because not everybody has the backing of a Microsoft or a Sony or an Amazon, or I don't know what the hell Google's doing, or but you see these kind of companies doing a massive amount of consolidation. What you'll end up hopefully seeing is a bunch of people having enough money that they can take risks and be innovative. But then you'll probably see the cycle where of the big companies or even another company starting to gobble up these IPs to kind of lock down that nostalgia. And like I said, it's going to be a charged video. It's longer than I hopefully intended, but ideally, I hopefully got my point across. Thank you so much, Harundo, for the suggestion of the topic, and I hope you guys enjoyed. I wish you all the best. Let me know if you have any questions, and hopefully you have a wonderful day. Until next time, take care.
Yeah. It's time to chill out on the couch and read some comments. That's right. You know me when it comes to Destiny. I'm off with the clan, and I'm glad you're feeling better. Oh yeah.